Electrocast.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today's episode tackles a topic at the heart of great leadership, and that's trust. I'm joined by Charles Feltman, an executive coach with over 25 years of experience helping leaders and teams build and maintain high levels of trust. Charles is the author of The Thin Book of Trust, now in its 3rd edition, and he brings a powerful framework that will change how you think about trust at work. Now, if you've ever wondered why some teams thrive and others fall apart, or how to rebuild trust when it's been broken, this conversation will give you the practical tools and insights that you need to succeed. Stick around because this episode will help you become the leader that everybody wants to work for. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership, the show built on one simple and powerful truth. Leadership is a people business. If you're ready to become a better boss and a stronger leader, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Today I'm joined by Charles Feltman. Charles works with people who seek to become the best leaders they can be for themselves, their teams, and their companies. He has served as an executive and leadership coach for over 25 years, and his primary focus is helping leaders and teams build and maintain a high level of trust. He is the author of The Thin Book of Trust, an essential primer for building trust at work, which is now in its 3rd edition. And I'm excited to have him on the show to talk more about the importance of trust at work. So, Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. I am as well. And this subject is so important in leadership and in companies. And so I'm excited to have you on the show to really talk about it since you've literally written the book on it. That's in its 3rd edition. So let's kind of get into it. First of all, how would you define trust and why does it matter? Why is it so important?
So I define trust a little bit differently than a number of other people who've written books about trust or speak about it. I define it as choosing or trusting someone is choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. So there's a lot in there. There's this idea of you're vulnerable. We're vulnerable when we trust someone. Now, there's a risk, obviously, so we're making a risk assessment. Is this person likely to, to treat what I'm making vulnerable to them, to treat that well, to not damage what's important to me or valuable to me? Or are they possibly going to damage it? And so there's this risk assessment, which kind of brings me to the point of saying, okay, do I want to trust them? And if so, to what extent do I want to trust them? So there's this idea of a risk assessment and the idea of vulnerability. And so it's kind of the basis of a choice to trust. So a lot of people that I work with initially often think that trust is just something that happens. You build trust with someone and by working with them or whatever, and then it's there. Sometimes it gets broken and then it's gone. We've certainly heard over the years many times people have said, trust is fast and easy long time to build, but you can break it in an instant. which I actually don't believe. I believe if there's a strong, solid foundation of trust, it can be repaired and even strengthened in that process. But going back again to this idea of choosing to trust, thinking about it, and not just acting on a gut level. I think gut level is good, and it's also important to think about it. So that's what I'll go back and say that definition again. It's choosing to make something you value vulnerable to another person's actions.
Mm.
So, you think about it, what do people make vulnerable to the actions of others around them in the workplace? There's all kinds of things that we do all the time we make vulnerable. But if we think about, hey, what's this particular thing? Do I want to make that vulnerable to this particular person? And if so, am I willing to deal with the consequences?
So give us an example maybe of what it means to be vulnerable. So what would be, so if I'm choosing to trust, say, my leader, and I'm willing to be vulnerable, something valuable to be vulnerable to his or her actions, what would that be like? Or can you give us an example of what that is?
Yeah, sure. Simple example is I know that my leader is going to be promoting somebody into a position on their team that's a little bit above where I am now. And so I go to my leader and say, John, imagine you're my leader. John, I really want this position.
Mm.
I think I would be great in this position, and I want it. Will you support me in getting this position? So I'm taking a little bit of a risk here. I'm making myself vulnerable, announcing that I have the desire for this position. Now, lots of things can happen out of that. My boss, can say, actually, I have somebody else in mind already. Okay, so it ends things pretty quickly. Probably not a lot lost there, not a lot of gained either. But you could also say to me, well, I'll consider it. I'll consider you.
Mm.
Now I'm sitting in this kind of position of vulnerability, wondering, if you're actually going to consider it and how that's going to play out and all of that stuff. Um, so do I go back to you again and bug you about it periodically and say, hey, how's it going, John? What are you thinking? And that kind of thing? Or do I just go, just put my head down and do my best work? And so there's this place of vulnerability in there. And there's a further vulnerability that can come if, in fact, you tell me that you're going to promote me. I'm the guy that you're going to tap for this. But then I find out from someone else that you actually gave it to another person. Now I'm really kind of vulnerable here because now you've done something that I see as untrustworthy.
Mm. Yeah.
And so how do I respond to that?
Yeah.
Especially if you're my boss, right? So one of the things that I work with clients around and talk about in my book is how do you go from there? What do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I imagine, and that's one of the things I, as a leader myself, is that I try to make sure that my word is my bond. So I undercommit and overperform. I tend to. So only because I want my words to be trustworthy, because I know when a boss doesn't keep their word, it's a very awkward situation, and when you lose that trust with your employees, it can be a bad situation. So in this case, the employee was vulnerable, and then the boss, sort of, kind of violated that trust, and I think that's hard to restore. You mentioned it may not be that hard to restore, or do you think in that case where the employee is vulnerable, and then the boss doesn't, that it doesn't hold that vulnerability properly and violates that trust? Is that a hard thing to overcome?
It can be. Most people who have, that feel that their trust has been breached or betrayed in some way, um, are uncomfortable with the idea of going and confronting the person who has, damaged their trust. Like, oh my God, I like what? Go talk to them? No. I'm not going to do that. That just could make things much worse.
Right.
I'll just live in this place of distrust and maybe some resentment and maybe resignation, and it gets really bad.
Yeah.
But if there previously was a pretty good trusting relationship, it turns out that people are able to work through that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that there's a way to do that makes it possible. So yes, I'm going to give you actually a slightly different scenario.
Okay.
That's maybe a little more. Let's say that I've been actually offered a job in another department that I really, and it's a good step up for me. And I go to you as my boss and I say, John, I'm going to apply for this job. Would you support me in doing this? Now I'm taking a different kind of risk, right? Because you as my boss might in fact make it hard for me to get that job because either you want to keep me on your team, or you just don't want me abandoning your, leaving or whatever it is. So I'm really trusting that you actually genuinely care for me and care for my, my prospects and what's important to me.
Yeah.
And we'll follow through on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So are you, as a boss, do you just care about your department and the success of your department or whatever it is, or do you care about the people? And that's the vulnerability there where the employee is saying, "Look, I'm about to test the waters here. Is my boss all about the department, or is he all about me? Does he care about me deeply, about me and my career and where I want to go?" And I think the best bosses will be focused on the person, right, and their overall success, whether it's in your department or another department. Yeah, yeah. So that's where you can be very vulnerable. I can see that in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
One of the things interesting, I use the word vulnerability when I talk about what it was like being on a submarine, because I always say that we, as a submarine crew, we had a shared responsibility for operating the submarine properly, but we also had a shared vulnerability for our lives, because if we did something wrong, if any one sailor did something wrong, we would all lose our lives because of the conditions we operated in. We were under the ocean, sea pressure, sea pressure. All I wanted to do was get inside the people tank, right? And our job was to keep it outside. And I think we had this shared responsibility to make sure that didn't happen, right? But we trusted each other, right? We trained and we had a high level of discipline to make sure that that everyone in the crew was trained and we could trust them with our very lives. So we were vulnerable together in this tank under the water, right? And so we had to trust each other, and we trust each other with our very lives. And so I use the word vulnerability there, but I see that what your definition fits really well with the way I think about how trust it was when I was on a submarine.
Yes. So this shared vulnerability. So if you kind of move that over to a team in a company, the
Yeah.
team is tasked with some particular deliverable that's important to the company's future, right? So there is that shared vulnerability together. You really need to deliver. If you don't deliver, you're all potentially, who knows? You could all get fired or dispersed to other teams or whatever. So there is this shared vulnerability, but it also probably rests more strongly on the team's leader than anyone else on the team. So there's maybe a little bit of a difference there. And death is probably not going to, it's not a life and death issue like it is in your submarine example.
Yeah.
So if somebody does screw up, everybody's going to live. And
Yeah.
in fact, maybe you learn something from the screw up that's really important for the team.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Cadre of Men. Leadership is a people business, and for men, real growth happens alongside those who challenge and inspire you. Cadre of Men is your force multiplier, helping you achieve more strength, deeper connections, and a stronger sense of purpose. I'm proud to call myself a member of this dynamic group. Cadre of Men is built for men who refuse to settle. With dedicated forums covering fitness, fatherhood, business, and more, we provide the tools and camaraderie to help you thrive. Our weekly Zoom calls dive into tough, real-world topics, often featuring expert guest speakers who will push you to sharpen your skills and mindset. Monthly meetups include intense hikes and hands-on building sessions where you forge bonds through shared challenges. From fitness and finance challenges to mastering public speaking, Cadre of Men delivers actionable curriculum in leadership, business, and personal growth. If you're ready to step up, push past your comfort zone, and lead by example, Cadre of Men is for you. Inside the Cadre, we grow together, lead together, and rise together. Visit cadreofmen.com to learn more and take the first step toward becoming your best self. This episode is brought to you by Pharaoh Skincare. I would have never imagined I'd be talking about skincare, but this stuff is truly amazing. Pharaoh is revolutionizing skincare by replacing harmful chemicals with natural ingredients sourced from regenerative farms. Now, weightlifting is tough on the hands, and Pharaoh's Epic Dermis is the best product I've ever used to get my callous hands back to normal and stay in the game. Now I use it every day. Pharaoh also works to reduce fine lines, wrinkles, and improve overall skin health. As Pharaoh CEO Charles Mayfield likes to say, a little Pharaoh goes a long way. Deep Leadership Podcast listeners can save 15% off all of their products by using the code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at pharaoh.life. That's FARROW.life. This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand on a mission to deliver premium, fresh roasted coffee while making a positive impact in the world. Their motto is drink coffee and do good, which reflects their commitment to making amazing coffee and actively supporting the military community. 10% of every order goes to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, an organization dedicated to helping sailors, Marines, and their families in times of need. All our listeners get 10% off every order of their amazing coffee by using the discount code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at saltysailorcoffee.com.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way. So you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
One area too, I talk about it when I tell, when I'm teaching at college courses, give stories from my career, but one area that when you become vulnerable is like if you have a failure, so if you have a boss and you're running some sort of project or what have you, and you have a failure, and that person then becomes vulnerable because they've had a failure or something bad happens, right? And then this question of how does the leader deal with that? So how do you deal with something that didn't go exactly according to plan? Because when I had a situation where I had a major failure. I was a design engineer and we had a major product failure. And so I was completely vulnerable because I was responsible for this one part of the design. And how did my boss deal with it? In this case, my boss had my back and helped me, made sure that I had what I needed to go back to the lab and test the product. And so at that point, I was very vulnerable, and it was because of a failure, but my boss backed me up. And so he built I had a high level of trust for him because he had my
my life and my career in his hands, and he handled it like exactly how I'd want it to happen. And so I would do anything for that boss because at that point I trusted him, implicitly.
Yeah, that's a great story. So I'm going to just kind of jump into a framework that I use
Yeah,
for
sure.
thinking about trust.
Yeah.
Because that story points to a particular part of that framework, which is really important. So, first of all, a lot of people think that trust is like a switch. Either it's on, you trust fully 100%, or it's off. You don't trust that person at all. There's no in between. There's no possibility of trusting in some ways and not others, in some situations and not others, so on. So when I think about trust, I think about it actually as existing in four distinct but interconnected domains. One domain is the domain of care, which essentially is you have my back. So you described perfectly a leader who demonstrated his care for you and you trusted him in that domain, and I would say probably in every other of all other of the four domains, because he demonstrated care in such a profound way in that situation. So there's that domain of care, which is you have my interests in mind as well as your own when you make decisions and take action. You have intend good for me. You want the best for me, and you have my back. So that's the domain of care. It's a different and, of course, somewhat related domain, which I call sincerity. Which is in that domain we're talking about integrity and honesty. So in the domain of sincerity, I trust that you're honest, that I can believe what you say, and that you're going to walk your talk. If you say something like, I have your back, John. I really am gonna come and support you. If something goes wrong, I'm gonna support you. Um, that's sincerity in action right there. Another example of sincerity is, I want this to be a high feedback team. I want us to all be able to give each other, good, honest feedback that's useful. And the team now is in a position of taking a risk, right? The first person who says to the boss, "Hey, boss, I think, I've noticed that blah, blah, blah." And the boss responds by saying, "Thank you. That's exactly what I need." Now you find there's trust in the domain of sincerity. Okay, my boss is sincere. They're walking their talk. I can believe what this person says. So that's the domain of sincerity. There's the domain of reliability, which is when, I trust that you will keep the specific commitments you make. So if you make a commitment to have this design piece for this bigger project done to the specifications needed by X date, you'll have it. Or if something outside of your control is derailing you, you'll tell whoever needs to know that it's going to be delayed and this is why it's going to be delayed, and then have a conversation about what you can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Before it's overdue.
Right, exactly. You don't come in at the late, "Oh, you know what? Something happened and I couldn't do it. I'm sorry."
Right.
Yeah, right. And then the last domain of trust is competence. That is essentially the assessment, the trust assessment, that you have the skills, expertise, experience, resources, etc., to do either what you're proposing to do or what I'm asking you to do. Or if you don't, that you will say so. That you'll say, "Hey, boss, I've never done this before. This is completely new to me. I may need some help with this. I may need support. I'll do my best work, and I may need some help." So those are the 4 trust domains. And the nice thing about that is I can trust someone, let's say, in the domain of care. They really do have my interests in mind, I believe. They're sincere. They're reasonably competent, but for the, there's they rarely ever get something in on time. It's like, okay, I can't trust them in the domain of reliability, but I'm not going to write that person off completely. Now I can think about this as, oh, okay, what can we do about that?
I love you bring up competence. That's very interesting because I think we get kind of sometimes we get enamored with all the different thoughts about leadership and like servant leadership and caring for people and all this sort of thing, which I think is important. But oftentimes we don't talk enough about competence. And I think that, when I'm talking to young leaders, is I'm like saying, you have to be competent as well. I think that's and we trust a boss who is competent. And I give you the example of of a captain of a ship, right? And so one of my first deployments was in North Atlantic in the wintertime, right? And we had terrible sea states, and so we were in a massive winter storm for 7 days. And I remember every sailor, whether they were junior or senior, everyone looked to the captain and like, does he know what he's doing, right? Because he has our lives in his hands. Does he know what he's doing? And as we saw him maintain calm and, kind of, guide us through that 7 days, right? Like we had trust in that captain because he was competent. He was experienced. He'd been there. He'd done that. And he knew what to do. And I think competence is a big player in whether or not our people feel like they can trust us as their boss. Are we good at what we do? I think that's something we don't talk enough about, I think, in leadership.
Yes, and it's also a huge problem because, and I'll give you an example of where it's a problem. There's somebody who's a fantastic engineer. They are just brilliant. And so they get promoted to a management of engineers position. Now they're managing a team of engineers, which is a whole different competency, right?
Yes.
Nobody ever asked them if they thought they could do that. They get into the role, they hate it because they're utterly incompetent and all, they just like, they hate it. The people who are now reporting to them hate it. Nobody likes it. But nobody realizes that the problem is that they're not competent in this new role that they've been shoved into. And so nobody steps up and says, hey, we can train you. We can send you to a workshop. We can do this. You can do that. They just assume that because they were a fantastic engineer, they're going to be a fantastic manager of engineers.
Yeah, I think it's a major problem. I see that as probably the biggest area where we have leadership failure is that like you said, we take our top engineer, we make him engineering manager. And so we don't understand that the skill sets needed to be the engineering manager are different than to be a great engineer. And I think we fail to provide the necessary training or development to give people that opportunity to actually be a great leader, right? So I think it's probably the biggest fault in corporate. I did 22 years in 3 global companies, and I saw that all the time. The best quality person became the quality manager, right? The best salesman became the sales manager, and they weren't the best leader. They were just the best at their best individual contributor, and that's always a problem. Yeah.
And I think as I said, the part of the problem is that people don't realize that it's a different competency.
Yes.
And so they don't get what's going on and why there's a problem. Why is this person not? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So of these 4, domains of trust that you have in your framework, which are ones that either people or team do well with, and which are ones that are more troublesome?
Well, so when I work with teams, which I do a lot, around trust, I'll ask them, where would you have? And I have a little exercise that I have them do, but basically the exercise is to get them to see for themselves or declare for themselves where they're doing well and where they're not doing so well. And it varies from team to team. It's there's often trouble in the domain of reliability. People are so overworked. You know, they've got so many things, so many balls in the air, and they're asked to do more and more juggling and so on. And so reliability is a problem for them. And so then because everybody's in that same boat, nobody holds anybody accountable, right? And so it just becomes this ongoing problem. So it's a sort of capacity management problem that the whole organization, or at least the whole team, has. So that's often an issue or an area of issue. But then from there, it just some teams, they see care. We really don't care, or we don't demonstrate care for each other. We don't take the time to tell each other, even the simple as sort of, hey, John, you did a great job back there. Here's what I saw, and this is what it meant for me. Thank you. Or whatever it is. So there's no, that gets, trust in that domain kind of fails to some degree because there isn't time. People don't take the time to do it. In other cases, it's competence. There's a new and junior team, and or some new and junior people on the team, and they're not competent, but nobody's really helping them out. And so they're just complaining of the lack of competence. So it's different for different teams. And so I do that. And then if I'm doing a larger leadership development program for a bunch of leaders, again, I'll have them self-assess for themselves and the teams they lead. And it's all over the map. So the important part is that they self-identify the area, the domain that they need to work on. And the domains that they do well in, so that they can, kind of relax around those domains, and at the same time, not relax so much that they let them go.
That makes a lot of sense. I was just thinking, I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and is it that some people have a greater propensity for trust, and do they start off with? I always say I start off with a glass half full. I trust you implicitly until you violate that trust. Whereas some people, I think, kind of come into relationships with glass is half empty. You have to earn your trust. So is it just a natural characteristics where, or is it just are we all on that spectrum someplace between we're naturally trusting and we're a naturally untrusting type of person?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will often have, if I'm doing a workshop with a bunch of people, I'll have them line, or even a smaller team, I'll have them line up. One end is you trust people easily. You extend trust to them, and it's up to them to damage it, And at the other end over here, the people who want others to earn their trust.
Yeah.
And so they can kind of see that, right? They can see, and there's even at that point, there's some people going, "Oh, okay, now I understand."
Yeah.
And then I might have them change places and look through the eyes of someone who's easily extends trust to others. Go over to that side, and how does that feel? What does it look like over there? How is that in that part of if you have that kind of mindset that you want people to earn your trust, and same with the other, you take those other, so the people who've earn my trust kind of folks go to the extend trust easily end of the spectrum, and they're going, this feels so vulnerable. Oh my gosh, I feel so exposed over here. And the people at the extend trust easily people down there going, I feel so hemmed in. Like, wow, this is crazy. How can you possibly? And so it's really interesting. Then they have these great conversations around that, and it's pretty cool.
I love that. Yeah. So I think that's what I noticed too, is that people sort of are in some area on that level. They're very trusting or not. I was just thinking to myself, if you get these dimensions right, and you have a high level of trust within the team along these 4 dimensions, what happens with a team that has a high level of trust?
So I think a couple things happen. One is, and you've probably heard this term, psychological safety. Everybody talks about it these days. And in fact, it's been pretty well demonstrated that psychological safety, when a team has that characteristic, if you will, when people feel safe to bring ideas forward that are new or different. They feel safe to challenge other people's ideas. In fact, they feel safe to say, "Hey, challenge my ideas." Um, then those people tend to be much more creative, much more innovative. They get work done much more quickly and effectively than teams at the other end of the spectrum. It's a mess. There's a disaster when there's low trust, right? Disaster. Most teams, however, are sort of somewhere in the passable middle.
Mm.
And that's where I find a lot of my work is I don't typically rescue teams that are a disaster. I work with teams that are somewhere in the middle that want to get better. And so when there is strong trust, okay, I know that my teammates are reliable and they'll come through with the commitments that they make. I know I can trust them. I know I can believe them when they tell me something that, they've done due diligence on this. Even if it's an opinion, they've actually, thought about it a little bit. It isn't just something that's off the top of their head. They're going to walk their talk. They actually do care about me. They care about me and they care about the other people on this team and the team as a whole, as our joint project here. I trust their competence. And I also trust that if they're not competent in something, they're going to say so that we don't end up down the line with a mess. And once that's kind of clear and people actually say that to each other, express that explicitly, boy, that team is very strong.
Love it. I love that. I've seen that. I've been on teams where the trust level was very low, and I've been on teams where the trust level was very high. And I can tell you, I love being on those teams where everybody has each other's back, and you're looking out for, everybody's working hard for a high level of performance for the team and not just individual objectives. And that's a great place to be. And it's very rewarding when you're on teams like that too. You always remember those times. And unfortunately, in your career, you only have a few of those. At least for me, I've only had a few of those really, really high trusting environments that I've been in. And that's been a fun experience for me. So,
yeah, I actually I had a hard one because the very first team that I was on was like that. And so I kind of thought that, hey, I can do this. This is great. And then I went to another company in another situation and a few teams in a row that were just, much harder.
Yeah. So I have a question. You've got a podcast as well. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and what do you do on your show?
Well, it's with another colleague of mine, Eli Edgar, and it's called Trust on Purpose, which is where we're basically talking about how do you actually build trust on purpose rather than just accidentally stumbling into it, because we think it's far too important to leave to chance. So we have conversations with each other about particular aspects of trust building. We have some wonderful guests come on. In fact, maybe we should have you on at some point. And we have some great guests that we interview. Hasn't been around as long as yours. We just celebrated 30,000 downloads.
Wow.
We did a little post on LinkedIn about it. That's our podcast. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, well, you did. We said I have a book. So I want to just, if I can, mention the book. It's The Thin Book of Trust. And it's the third edition. And it's thin. In fact, I'll show you. It's thin. Which means that most people who read reasonably fast, not me, but most people, could get on a plane in Los Angeles, pick up the book, arrive in Chicago having read the book and actually having something that they can now do differently to build stronger trust with whoever they're meeting with in Chicago.
I love it.
So
I love it. I think the most effective business books are smaller, to be honest with you. I think you're more likely to read it and actually do it versus getting bogged down in a 400-page diatribe. And I love that part about the book, and that's outstanding. So, Charles, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
I think I'm going to read a quote, which is kind of, a lot of people talk about what's your why. This is a quote from a man named Walter Anderson. We're never so vulnerable than when we trust someone. So we've talked a little bit about that. But paradoxically, if we cannot trust, neither can we find love or joy. And, you were talking a little bit ago about how fun it is, how joyful it is, and how much you love to be on those teams where, there's, firing on all 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 cylinders, that things are really working well, because there's a strong foundation of trust underneath everything. And so, that's what I want people to kind of think about and go for, is trust building as a foundation for everything else that their team does, including having that kind of camaraderie, that joy of working together, that love of working with this group of people.
I love it. I love it. We want to be on those kind of teams. We're going to get some joy out of our jobs. We're going to enjoy the challenge, and when you're part of a team that's doing things, at a high speed, the speed of trust, where you trust each other and you're getting great things done. It's a fun place to be. So, if you haven't been on a team like that, get on a team like that. Or if you're a leader, or create a team. Yeah, create a team.
Yeah, if you're a leader, create one like that. And if you're wondering how to do that, get a copy of the book. Contact me. You can reach me. Is it okay if I tell them how they can reach me? Is that?
Yeah, tell us how can we learn more about you, your book, your services, your podcast? Where do we go?
Insightcoaching.com is my website. www.insight, all one word, INSIGHT coaching, insightcoaching.com. Is where you can find out a little bit about me and my services. I also am on one social media site, which is LinkedIn. I don't really have any kind of presence anywhere else, at least business, professional presence. So those are the 2 places. And then, of course, the Thin Book of Trust, which has the material in it that I think you'll benefit from if you have not already found that book. So.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to put links in the show notes for all of Charles' resources. And again, it's the Thin Book of Trust. It's a quick read. You can read it quickly, and you can implement the ideas quickly. Highly recommend it. And then the podcast is Trust on Purpose, and we'll put links to that as well so that you can find that and add that to your, one of the podcasts you listen to on your way into work. Don't. When you're on a commute, you can get a chance to get better, or you can stay the same. But I really highly encourage leaders. You should always be working to get better, and you can do that through podcasts, books on tape, books on tape. Listen to me, I'm old.
What generation are you coming from here?
Audible, you can listen to books. But absolutely, get better. We had a guest one time talking about mental cupcakes. That's maybe listening to music or whatever. But feed your mind while you're in your commute. And so, Trust on Purpose is a great podcast for doing that. So, we'll put links in the show notes for all of Charles' resources. If you have a question, I recommend reaching out to him and learn a little bit more about trust from Charles. So, Charles, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing all of your knowledge on this really important topic.
John, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. You're a good interviewer. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you as well. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. For more information and updates, please visit our website at johnsrennie.com.
Why is it that games make us feel so good or completely rage quit? These emotions we feel are mostly not an accident. People like me designed them. I'm Chris Cross, and this is Brain Arcade, a podcast all about the psychology of game design and why games hit us so hard. Each week, I bring on a new guest, designers, psychologists, storytellers, to break it all down with me. If you play, design, or just love games, follow now.
Electricast.